Also, incidentally, just while we're on the subject, the FA Cup. The FA Cup gets a mention this morning. It
does.
Well, you've gone down the road of favouring the FA Cup to be played behind a paywall.
No, I haven't. I've mooted it because, as I say in the article, that what happens every single year is this hand-wringing and this false concern about what the FA Cup is and how it is going to be diminished. The reality of it is that the all-consuming beast is the Premier League, and what I'm doing is suggesting that the way that the Premier League is marketed by those incompetents at the FA, that they're so weak that they're actually getting the Premier League to sell the media rights for it, might be benefited by going towards a Sky model, where, let's be honest about it.
There's no way I thought you would think like this.
No, I don't think much of Sky, but I do think that ultimately their presentation of live events is remarkable. Football exists in this country in a new format because of the broadcasters. Everything that's being done for sport is being done by the broadcasters. Look at darts. Look at the idea of what's happening with darts. Look what's happened with snooker. Look what's happening to other sports that these broadcasters that have a real fine eye for developing the sort of raw effects of sport.
But the charm of the FA Cup is that it's not behind a paywall. The charm of the FA Cup is it stayed terrestrial.
Well, I don't think that's the charm of it. I think the charm of the FA Cup, I don't think that's the charm of it at all. I think the charm of the FA Cup is it's a remarkable tournament that has huge value and is the oldest cup competition in the world and is revered around the world. But in order for it to compete against the monster of the Premier League and the concerns, I'm not one of the hand-wringers. I'm not suggesting there is a problem, but for those that think there is a problem, here's some potential solutions. Okay, would you prefer this then? If you think the FA Cup is being diminished and you think it's going to die on its backside because of the all-consuming nature of the Premier League, then here's some alternatives. I'm not advocating for it to be behind a paywall. Maybe there's a model that Sky can acquire the rights for the Premier League and not necessarily put it behind a pay model, put it through a different free-to-air proposition and just take the advertising revenue. I'm not suggesting that that's the only way to go. What I'm saying is, if you genuinely think that this competition is beginning to lose its lustre, then think about it differently then. How about this? Is this preferable? Is that preferable?
I noticed you say the FA Cup third round is special and it always will be.
Yeah.
It allows smaller clubs to take on the big boys they only ever get to see on TV. But the terrestrial broadcast rights give it the feel and look of what it is, the old man with the rattle. That's why people love the FA Cup. Well, the old man and the rattle image.
But they do and they don't. I mean, look, the argument being waged.
Who doesn't like that?
Well, it would appear that there were certain people and certain sections of the media and certain sections of the fan base that think the FA Cup is being lost and potentially being swallowed up, as I say, by the omnipotent presence of the Premier League and what the Premier League clubs want it to be, and how replays are being knocked out, and how the semi-finals are being played at Wembley, and all of these things. And how the games
doesn't need to compete with the Premier League, the FA Cup.
Well,
the FA Cup equals tradition.
It does and it doesn't, because if we start to see that there's less interest from the senior clubs and the bigger clubs inside the tournament, and all of a sudden the values are being diminished by their lack of participation or engagement, then I'm playing devil's advocate. If you read the article, I don't think there's a problem. The question was posed to me by the newspaper, is this constant, every time the FA Cup comes around, a bunch of hand-wringers say, what is happening to the FA Cup? It's losing its lustre. People are not being interested in it. So I posed the question, which is, if that is indeed the case, what are the solutions? Do we perhaps need to give... Because the charm of the FA Cup doesn't translate around the world. Nobody cares, as I say in the article, that someone for Hereford scored a worldie against Newcastle in an FA Cup draw years ago that was so quaint and quintessentially English. But the broadcasters around the world do care about Liverpool and Manchester United and Manchester City. And
I think
Arsenal
everybody cares about things like that. The Ronnie Radford goal is still very vivid in your mind.
But they don't in Malaysia, and they don't in Indonesia, and they don't in Australasia, and they don't in North America.
They stick it behind a paywall. A lot of people will be deprived of seeing it.
I'm not suggesting you stick it behind a paywall. I'm suggesting that as one of the options. If you believe there's a general concern about the diminishing of this particular tournament, here's a raft of ways of looking at it, and here are some potential solutions. Are they palatable? Are they better than what we've currently got? Are we lacking in an opportunity to evolve? Everything has to evolve. You don't want to lose tradition, but like I said, maybe there's an opportunity to seed the big clubs so that they don't draw one another in the third round, so that the smaller clubs get an opportunity to be drawn in the third round against a big club, and everybody gets some natural intrigue. And all of a sudden, smaller clubs are getting different audiences because the bigger clubs are participating, and the audience worldwide gets a different feel about it. Why do you think the Premier League have taken the rights from the FA? Why do you think the FA have gone to the Premier League and said, we're so incompetent, lazy, ineffective, and unable to manage our own business that we're going to get the league that we're supposed to be controlling to sell our media rights for the country's cup?
The Premier League has become a monster, but not a ghastly monster, a monster of a thing. Well, I mean, you say the Premier League is a juggernaut, the only show in town. But the FA Cup is still, it means one hell of a lot to a lot of people. Stick it behind a paywall, a lot of people will be deprived from seeing it.
You're taking the paywall argument and not looking at the central position that I was taking, which is this tournament being diminished? No, I don't think it is. But for those that actually do and believe that it needs greater revenues, needs greater prize money, needs greater coverage and representation and better opportunities and a slight restructuring in order to keep its relevance, because there is a battle, isn't there? You know, you've got UEFA suggesting that cup competition should be potentially be dropped out of domestic leagues. If you lose the League Cup as the fourth tournament in this country, which has been lost in the other European competitions, the next thing that will happen is the FA Cup. We see that the FA Cup isn't taken quite as seriously as it once was before. It doesn't have quite the same position because the beast that is the Premier League has superseded it. So in the camp for those that think it's being diminished, here's some alternative views. Here's a different look at what it could look like.
Are you having the fixtures being spread that they are at the moment, like Palace Everton tonight, Thursday night?
Well, why is that?
Like tomorrow night, Brentford Wolves, Fulham Rotherham, Spurs Burnley.
But why are they being spread like that?
Night.
They're being spread for broadcasters. That's the reasons why these games are being played this way. So we now know who runs football and have known it for some time, which is the broadcasters, because of the nature of the funding. So if we do believe that the FA Cup needs a reboot and needs to be re-centralised as a core proposition, and that the Premier League isn't the only game in town, then maybe there's some different ways of doing it.
Where do we stand on that, actually? At this stage in the proceeding, I'll put it out there, we're running behind a bit because I didn't think we'd get caught up, as we have done, on the FA Cup coming out the way it's come out in your column. Would the world's oldest cup competition really become more relevant if it headed behind a paywall? Just for starters, would it become more relevant if it was to do that? Or should it stay terrestrial? The cup being skyified. Progression, in your eyes, or would it kill the appeal?
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.